Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christian Eschbach, and welcome to another one of my album rap parties. This one is for Iron Butterfly. Iron Butterfly, we are talking one of the originators of heavy metal. They were definitely proto metal, whatever way you want to try and describe it. These guys, they was metal, man, and technically they existed before Black Sabbath. So, I mean, before Black Sabbath was Black Sabbath, they were still technically Earth. And when Iron Butterfly dropped their first album, Black Sabbath was still like a year off from dropping theirs. So, while I consider Black Sabbath the true originators of metal, even I am going to say Iron Butterfly did it first. And you can hear quite a bit of it later on into Black Sabbath. I bring up Black Sabbath because Black Sabbath was, my last two rap parties. And going to Iron Butterfly felt natural here. If you're one of my regular viewers, you've already gone through the huge string of Iron Butterfly reviews that I covered, and you know that 3 of the albums that we're going to talk about here, I've actually had for a substantial amount of time. One of them I literally grew up with. I remember it as an itty bitty little tiny child. And when I say itty bitty tiny little child, I mean, like, my parents were still together. I hadn't gotten divorced yet, which means I was like 9 years old or younger. And my dad put this on, man, in the car. And the first time I heard that drum solo, or at least the first time I remember hearing that drum solo, I was hooked. So the Iron Butterfly In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida album I've listened to my whole life. Pretty much. Most of my memorable life. Other albums slowly picked up over the years. The Heavy album I picked up in my early to mid 20s and was blown away by that one. Scorching Beauty, it took until my 30s before I found a copy of it. And the rest of the albums I picked up now in my 40s because go watch the reviews for all that where I talk about all that. It's more fun that way. We're going to get into this. Now, one thing I avoided talking about in the reviews was the band members that flowed through Iron Butterfly in the time that they were releasing their albums. Now, take into consideration, Iron Butterfly dropped a shit ton of albums in a very small period of time, okay? So, as I go through this, you're going to see how this works out, and it's kind of crazy. If I mess up one of the years, please excuse me, because I know I'm going to mess one of the years up, because I don't have it in front of me, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. When the band started out with the first album, okay, the first album being Heavy, that was 1968. Ron Bushy is the drummer. Ron Bushy is the one constant member the whole way through, okay? So all the drums on all the albums the whole way through that we're talking about, it's Ron Bushy playing drums. Ron Bushy is by far an underrated drummer. He is spectacular. Oh my God. We're talking like some real, he should be up there on lists with some of the other great big names, like John Bonham, Keith Moon, for me, Neil Smith of Alice Cooper. I mean, we're talking this dude, it should really be up there. And not just because of the In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida drum solo. The whole way through, his drumming is always spectacular and interesting. Then I'm going to talk Doug Ingle. Doug Ingle was the original, or the big primary vocalist. He was not the main vocalist for the Heavy album. I'm going to call him a secondary vocalist for the Heavy album, but he was there, and he plays the organ, and he plays the organ on the first 4 albums. So there is a distinct change in the sound of the organ when you get out of there, which we'll get into. And I did talk about this when I did the review for Scorching Beauty, which was the first album without him. Also, continuing on, we got Daryl Delaroche, who was tambourine and vocals. I'm going to say he was, for the most part, the lead vocals on here and the main vocalist. One thing with Iron Butterfly is they've always used multiple vocalists to their advantage, and it did start all the way back with this first album. But I want to give Daryl a little more credit than saying it was the guy that played the tambourine and like sang on one song, man. After that, we go into Jerry Penrod, who was bass and vocals. I believe this is Jerry's only album. This was Daryl's only album as well. And then we've got Danny Weiss on guitar. And this was also Danny's only album. So basically, after this album, after the Heavy album, Ron Bushy and Doug Engel replaced the band. And when they did replace the band, that band became the band for the next two albums. And in a manner of speaking, is the classic lineup. You know, when they talk of the people that do talk about Iron Butterfly, this would be the Iron Butterfly classic lineup. This would be like Iron Maiden, you know, Bruce Dickinson was not there in the beginning. Adrian Smith was not there in the beginning. Yannick Gers was not there in the beginning, but they're all part of the classic lineup. So, you know, once again, you got Ron and Doug. Eric Brand comes in, and he is the guitarist on this, on both the In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida album and the Ball album. And Lee Dorman plays bass on both of those albums as well. And In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is legendary. I think it's fantastic. Weirdly, Ball charted better, but I don't think Ball was that good of an album. And I understand why there was a band change after this. But here's the thing I really want to point out. As I said, Heavy was released in 1968. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Ball were released, released 68, 69. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is the one I can't remember 100% which side of the line it was on off the top of my head. Ball was definitely in 69. And then there was even the live album also that came out in 69. So when you look at it that way, you're basically already up to 4 albums. Live album doesn't quite count. But you got 3 albums in the span of 2 years. And they've already burned out and replaced a whole entire lineup of musicians. And then you get to the next album, Metamorphosis. And when you get to Metamorphosis, they lost Eric Brand on guitar. But everybody else stayed. And they ended up replacing Eric Brand with not one, but 2 guitarists. They ended up bringing in Mike Panera and then Larry Reinhardt. Mike Panera brought something really interesting to the Metamorphosis album by introducing the talk box, which I talk about in the actual album review, so go watch the album review. Really cool, really awesome. I really dig the Metamorphosis album. I was surprised at how much I dug the Metamorphosis album, because after listening to Ball, I was kind of like, eh. And the next album I'm going to get into, Scorching Beauty, I had already heard at this point as well. And I wasn't huge on that one. So I wasn't expecting a lot from Metamorphosis. But that change in guitarist for that album really made a huge difference. And I also know another reason why it made a huge difference, and it makes it a big deal to me, is Eric Brand does a lot of singing when he's on the albums, and I don't like when he does the warble vocals, which I've covered intensely. I don't want to get into again. But we're going to move on. Now, Metamorphosis was released in 1970. At this point, I'm going to say that they either got dropped by their label because they were getting declining sales, or the band had enough and they just kind of blew apart. Which is a shame, because this particular lineup I thought was really good. The music was pretty innovative and really was a nice step in the next direction. Really kind of cool to me. Not a horrible loss, though, moving on. Just a little bit. When we get to the Scorching Beauty album, which is the next album up, it is released in 1975. Actually, both albums technically were released in 1975. You got Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel were both released in 75. Based on my research, Scorching Beauty, they started working on it, recording it, and stuff like that in '74, and then Sun and Steel was worked on partially in '74 and then continued in '75 before they recorded. This could have been a double album. Maybe they were aiming for the double album, and the record company backed off of it. There is part of me that wants to say that a little bit. There's part of me that thinks that has nothing to do with it. And it's really interesting because they actually switch out one band member in this time period. Because what happens is with Scorching Beauty, you get Ron Bushy, Eric Brand, Philip Taylor Kramer on the bass now, and Howard Reitzes? I'm not sure how to say that. On keyboards, and everybody except for the drummer takes turns doing vocals. When you get to the next album, Sun and Steel, which, like I said, these were done pretty much back to back, you switch out the keyboards from Howard to Bill DeMartini. And personally, I think they made a huge mistake doing it the way they did. I think Sun and Steel should have been the first album, and Scorching Beauty should have been the second album. I really do not like Scorching Beauty, and I really think Sun and Steel is highly undervalued and underrated. I've seen that it really, most critics don't review it well, and I might be one of the first critics to review it as in depth as I did. But I am going to say that this particular band lineup here, really solid, really good. I really like this one. I like this band lineup better than I do Scorching Beauty. One of my biggest complaints actually with Scorching Beauty is the keyboards throughout the album. I don't have that complaint so much about Sun and Steel. I think the keyboards sounded a lot better. So I'm going to say that difference makes a huge change. The whole way around, you definitely notice a difference with the band. When Doug Ingle is in the band, there is definitely a lot more mood, a lot more depression, a lot darker, a lot more sinister, a lot more God. For a trippy band, this is not the stuff I want to listen to on a trip. When it gets to the Ron Bushy, Eric Brand period, it's more lighthearted, we'll say, a little more enjoyable. Life is a wonderful thing worth living. That's the way I want to look at that. The other thing I want to really get into here a little bit is the classic lineup that I've already covered. The one being Bushy, Ingle, Dorman, and Brand. They actually got back together and toured again as Iron Butterfly in, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in around there. And Iron Butterfly has actually kind of toured off and on nonstop to the present day. The problem is, here's the big problem. There are no core members, original members, or members that were part of this band at all for any of these albums as part of the band anymore. It's a band in name only. It's basically, it should be listed as a tribute band. If you go to see Iron Butterfly nowadays, you're going to see a tribute band. Ron Bushy was the last core member, the only original member left. I'm assuming he had held the name and ended up selling off the name, I'm going to guess and say. But when he was in there, at least you could say that there was someone that had been there from the beginning. When he left in, I think it was 2020 was when he was done. That was it, man. Iron Butterfly should have officially been over. If people want to go around as Iron Butterfly tribute band, by all means, go around as Iron Butterfly tribute band. I got nothing against that. But that being said, if you're going to be an Iron Butterfly tribute band, I'm going to give you a double album. Double vinyl album. Double greatest hits album. Part of that's just because of how long the damn songs are. Okay. So let's move on to that. Right before I talk about this double album, I have to be very clear. I have to be very open. I have to be very honest. When I put everything together, when I did this, there are two specific Iron Butterfly songs that I cannot get my hands on. I can't help but deceive you, little girl, to be alone. Both of these were recorded somewhere around the Ball sessions, or at least in around that period. They were released on the Ball special release album edition that was done in, I think, 1998. I couldn't get my hands on it. I've covered this in my reviews already. Unfortunately, the way I had to get the albums, because it was the only way I could find them anymore, it blocks me from eligibility for those songs. So, those songs cannot be included in here. I do apologize. We are now going to move on to what I can include in here, which is everything that was actually on the core albums. I believe I Can't Help But Deceive You, Little Girl was available on one of the Greatest Hits albums. I don't think To Be Alone was. There is a Greatest Hits album out there, which I also cannot find and get my hands on. And the worst part is, I remember seeing it all the time as a kid and thinking about picking it up, and I never picked it up because I didn't want to pick up a Greatest Hits album. If I knew then what I know now, right? Okay, so my double vinyl. You guys are going to love this one. First album starts off with In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Oh yeah, damn straight, baby. However, it's just the single version. The reason why I'm starting off with a single version, you're going to get people out there that are going to buy a Greatest Hits album just for this damn song to start with. So let's give them the song they want right at the beginning. Suck it in with the short version and then make them go the rest of the way through. After that, we get into You Can't Win off the Heavy album. Really dig this. I also want to point out that I did not do these entirely in order. I wanted to, partially because of song lengths, stuff like that. I kind of had to play a little bit of mix and match with them, just a little bit, to get them to fit the way I wanted them to fit. So You Can't Win is the next song. I also want a good song flow, and from there you go into Possession, which is also off of the Heavy album, and then Fields of the Sun. Possession and Fields of the Sun, they get a little on that crazy trippy side. You Can't Win, a little on the angry side. Possession, kind of in this weird zone. I really dig the song. I really like the lyrics on that one. I like the idea of talking about that whole being possessive of your woman kind of thing and the negative way that they kind of do it. So I really dig in that. And then going into Fields of Sun, that just kind of has the right kind of eerie kind of thing. And that really kind of, once again, Doug Ingles time period, very much this is his kind of style. This was the Iron Butterfly kind of style, be kind of creepy and angry, or not necessarily angry so much, but, and the reason why I say not angry so much, but it still is in there, is off the live album, partially because it's a faster version, and partially because it's a shorter song, so I could fit it on easier and get extra songs in there, etc., etc., etc. I put on the live version of Are You Happy, which is so insanely fast compared to the original. Holy crap. Going from to craziness, man. Like, just totally insane. Love the live version. Had to put the live version on here of this one. And I thought it was appropriate to have a live something on here. And then I go into Real Fright, which I thought was a great creepy song to kind of follow up Are You Happy? And then finish out with Iron Butterfly Theme, because it's honestly one of my absolute favorite Iron Butterfly songs. It's one of their only instrumental songs that's like good length instrumental. Just killer tune. This song has influenced me in so many ways. It's unreal. Apologies, I forgot to mention, Real Fright is off the Ball album. Iron Butterfly Theme is off the Heavy album. Side B, 2 songs, that's it. Scorching Beauty off of Sun and Steel. That was weird how that happened. I talked about that in the cover, or when I covered those albums in the reviews. And Butterfly Blue is the other one. Scorching Beauty I like better than Butterfly Blue. But Butterfly Blue, the reason why I included this on here is a beautiful song. It's got a lot of experimentation in it. very proggy kind of song. And out of a lot of their songs, this one's probably one of the most proggy. Um, and Butterfly Blue is off the Metamorphosis album. I kind of actually had a hard time trying to pick what songs I wanted to include off of Metamorphosis, but I really dug this one, and I really did try to include all of their kind of cooler, signature, proggy kind of songs on this collection. Um, Iron Butterfly theme off of Heavy, which was on side 1. Scorching Beauty and Butterfly Blue are both on side 2. And then when we get into side B, I've got side A, side B, side C, which is the second disc or second album, first side. I've got Shady Lady off of Metamorphosis because I think it's a fantastic song. It's got some great energy and pulse to it. Lonely Boy off of Ball. It is probably the slowest, most soulful song that Iron Butterfly has released. And when it comes to the Ball album, it definitely is probably one of my favorite songs off there. It's one of the ones that will always stand out to me the most. And if I were to put mixes together, like if I'm putting together this as an actual like mixtape or whatever, this would be my mixtape and this would be how I'd put it together as well as I'm going through here. But I really do dig Lonely Boy. I think it's one of those songs that people really should kind of check out. New Day, also off of Metamorphosis on here. Another song I really kind of dig on. I really get into. Choice song. And there's only one song off of Scorching Beauty that is included in this entire set. Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel are generally ignored. Sun and Steel, for some reason, is the one that gets ignored the hardest. And I don't understand why. I think it's the better album. I think it's got better songs on it. Pearly Gate is the only song off of Scorching Beauty I included in here. I really did contemplate putting High on a Mountaintop on here, but then I would have had to have taken off songs I enjoy much better. And High on a Mountaintop, I like it, but I like it when I'm listening to that album. When I'm listening to Iron Butterfly, I'm not so much into it. Whereas Pearly Gate, I kind of really get into it. It's got a great energy to it, a great vibe, great flow. It just kind of works for me. And a lot of different changes. So it really just, it's a good tune. The only song on that album I'd really say is worth checking out, other than maybe High on a Mountaintop, which weirdly I've talked about a little bit more. But Pearly Gate is the better song as far as I'm concerned. Okay, after that we're into Beyond the Milky Way and Lightning, both off of Sun and Steel. I totally dig on both of these songs as well. I think they're great songs. They've got good energy to them. They've got great music to them. I like listening to them. The Sun and Steel album is surprisingly really good. I honestly wish I had found this album decades ago, because this album would have inspired a lot more of me musically, I think, especially back in the 90s. The music I was listening to and the band that I was in particularly playing with, I think this really would have influenced us back then. All right, so that makes up side C. And then when you get to side D, 2 songs again. Once again, we're going more on the proggier side. You got Scion off of Sun and Steel, and you've got In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, the full-length version. I contemplated putting the live version on here off the live album because I really dig the live version, but if I'm putting together a double greatest hits, and I know people are going to want to listen to a double greatest hits, I can't put the live version on and ignore the original classic version that everybody wants to hear, because the live version is not the same and people are going to want to hear what they're going to want to hear. So that was my way of designing this one. And I figured start with the single, end with the original or the classic, call it a day. So folks, that's it. I feel that I've covered more than enough Iron Butterfly. Between this and all my reviews, you have heard way more about Iron Butterfly than you ever needed to know or ever wanted to know. I do partially regret pushing so much Iron Butterfly here over the last month, but the reality is this is one of those bands I really think people should go check out. Everybody knows In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. It's a great song, but the rest of their catalog is really cool and has a lot of great songs in it. And I think a lot of these songs deserve more respect and more time than they've gotten over the years. And I really think people really should check out Iron Butterfly because this is a band that has so much to offer. So much to offer. And I really wish record companies would let me put together best of packages, or we're going to call it the Christian Eschbach Turn You On series. Because that's what I'd love to do with all these. You know, to me, that's what it is. I love putting together collections to turn people on. And with Iron Butterfly, if you heard this, there are a few in there that might not turn you on. Like, the reality is, Butterfly Blue being as long as it is and being on its side almost exclusively by itself, with Scorching Beauty being the only one. If I were to put together these sets, the first side would be the one that would get played the most often, obviously, there. When it comes to the second vinyl, there's a high probability both sides would get played the same. Scorching Beauty, good tune. Butterfly Blue is the only one on this entire collection that I would hem and haw on. And like I said, I put it in there because it is a great representation of all the craziness that this band could do. All right. I'm done. I hope I have talked you into going out there and exploring some Iron Butterfly. If you are a record company and you've seen this and somehow you're willing to let me start producing and putting out greatest hits packages for bands like this, I think Rhino is the one I should be really looking at here. Because last time I remember, I believe they had the rights to some of these albums, at least based on some of my copies. So, let me know what you think, guys. Are you an Iron Butterfly fan? Have you listened to them? Do you have favorites? Tell me. Comment section. Do you want to know more about Iron Butterfly? Tell me. Comments. Haha. On your way down to the comments, there is a link to Patreon. Greatly appreciated. Please and thank you. Like, bell for notifications, subscribe button, those three. Those are all important. If you can hit those are really important to me. They help out everybody. Peace. Love. Take care.